This episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Whether it's espresso machines, manual brewing devices, or general coffee shop needs, they seek to pursue the most innovative coffee products, both domestic and abroad, to offer their customers. Find out more at prima-coffee.com. This is Keys to the Shop, episode number 29, and today we're talking all about the Specialty Coffee Association with Vice President Heather Perry. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop. I'm really glad that you decided to join us today. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host, and this podcast is dedicated to giving you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. And one of those things that we need to grow is each other, community, networking, associations, let's say. Things like maybe the Specialty Coffee Association. Yeah, and that's what we're talking about today. All about the Specialty Coffee Association, or formerly the SCAA, and the unification that just happened last year, 2016, between the Specialty Coffee Association of America and the Specialty Coffee Association of Europe. Now, a bit of history. I mean, the Specialty Coffee Association of America has been around since 1982, when it was just a small group of people forming a nonprofit to promote specialty coffee all around the world. Since then, obviously, there's been an explosion in specialty coffee globally, and that means globally there are a lot of associations as well for specialty coffee, which has just increased the standing of specialty coffee in the coffee industry at large. And of course, the Specialty Coffee Association of America and the Association of Europe were two of the largest organizations. And today we're going to talk about what precipitated that event. What was behind that decision? How has it been going? What are the plans on the horizon right now? What are the goals of the association? And why does it matter for you as a retail professional, somebody working in cafes? What can you expect in terms of what it will do for the retail side of things? And what can we expect in the coming years with leadership, events, membership, education, research? What's in it for you as a small business? And today, to answer those questions and more, we're talking with none other than the Vice President of the SCA herself, Heather Perry. So let me tell you a little bit about who Heather is. Besides being the Specialty Coffee Association's Vice President, she's also the Vice President of Klatch Coffee out in California, a roaster retailer out in California that is an award-winning coffee bar and roastery. Mike Perry out there doing magic with the roasting. And Heather's roots in the industry are in retail. Heather is a two-time U.S. Barista Champion, and she's the first person to ever win the United States Barista Championships twice. And she's also a second-place World Barista Championship finalist. Heather is essentially a tour de force for the coffee industry. She's been involved in leadership positions with the association in one form or another for over 12 years. So not only has she been working to make great coffee through the business at Klatch, but she's also been working to serve the specialty coffee community through her leadership positions in the association. And so I can't think of anybody better to talk to about these things. And she is just somebody who I greatly respect, one of the people in the industry who I truly look up to. So with all that said, I'm excited to bring you to the conversation. Let's talk about the SCA, all right? So here now is my interview with Vice President of the SCA, Heather Perry. All right, Heather Perry of Klatch Coffee and Vice President of SCA, welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on the show. We used to get to see each other very often at like coffee fest, trade shows here and there, and now it seems like we're both pretty busy doing our own our little thing here in different sides of the country. So I'm really stoked.
I am too, especially when we see each other. We don't even get much time to chat necessarily. So I think this is a great opportunity. I'm excited.
Well, you've been super busy. We were just chatting before the interview here about what you're up to. And you're not only the vice president of SCA, but you're also technically vice president of Klatch. I mean, you kind of do a bit of everything with the company over there in California.
Yeah, we've been in business for over 20 years and we're a roaster retailer. And so we've got 3 of our own cafes that we own and operate. We have a licensing agreement at LAX that we're nice and connected to, which is great. And then just constantly looking at how to grow the company. The past probably few years have really been spent heavy on the online side and the wholesale side of things. And now we're looking at how we can expand the retail side of things.
I remember at different events, maybe it was one event in particular, you were like doing the schedule for one of the stores on paper. And I think your comment at the time was like, you just know who works well together with who. And you were just all about making that cafe work exactly right. I think that was really admirable. And it kind of sticks with me for some reason.
Funnier thing is I've moved to Excel, but I still do the schedules for one of our stores. I just can't let go of it all. It's funny that you would bring that up because, I have moved from pen and paper over to Excel, but I still do one of our stores, yeah.
Very cool. I'm almost like converting myself away from spreadsheets to paper now for some reason.
I know, huh?
Yeah. Well, you're also SCA vice president, and I wonder how long, actually, I was thinking about this before the interview, like how long have you been involved in previously the SCAA and now SCA in leadership roles?
Probably 12 years, give or take. I won my first championship in 2003 and got involved a little bit after that, I think, in the guild and went through the chair positions on the guild and then moved over to the board and was on the board for, I think, 4 or 6 years before I started moving through the chairs. And I joke that everybody knows how much I love second place. So I'm like permanent vice president, it feels like, because I was vice president of the SCAA when we merged. And part of the what we've done is we wanted to hold the board steady for 2 years to create a good continuity. So I will have 3 years as vice president. So,
nice.
Because I just love second so much. We just want to make sure I all know it.
There's got to be some benefit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But, I got to watch Ben Pitts was president of the association during the whole merger, and it was great to kind of watch him. I really look up to him and what he does. And Paul Stack is president of the association now. And, it's not easy to merge two associations. So it's been great to be able to watch and learn from him. And then I'm super excited for when I get to take over because we have a line of women that will be running the association for 3 years. So I think it's just a great opportunity to see what we can do.
Very nice. Well, that's what we're here to talk about. And, 12 years in leadership roles in the association and getting to see all of this firsthand, and the fact that, you're just super involved with, the retail side of the industry and serving specialty coffee, and you're just more qualified than most to speak on these things. And so I wonder if you could give us sort of not an exhaustive history of the SCAA with, they started with a circle of people, on the floor at the NCA, what is it? At the National Coffee Association, and now it's huge. But give us a rundown of what is the SCAA, or now SCA's mission up until this point, and how did it go about accomplishing that mission for its members?
So one of the big reasons that talks of unification initially came out is because we were two associations on separate parts of the world with very, very similar missions. The mission that we have now, the joint mission, is to engage, inspire, and expand a sustainable global specialty coffee community through shared values and core commitments. And, I think when you hear that, it speaks to everybody, whether you're a retailer, whether you're a producer, whether you're an importer. I think that the fact that spoke to everybody so clearly and coming up with a mission was probably one of the easiest things we did during the merger. Financially, it made a ton of sense to do the merger. But one of the reasons that we took as long as it did, talks of the merger started in 2011 to give you kind of some perspective. Part of the reasons it was such a long process is it couldn't just make financial sense. We're both membership organizations, and so ultimately we had to look at okay, so we know that there can be some opportunities, but does this actually serve our members? Does it benefit our members like we want it to? And that's where we spent the majority of our time talking about. And that's why ultimately we decided to move forward, and the membership, in our opinion, voted yes, because looking at the big picture, it did make sense and it did serve the members. Both associations are, the SCAA was almost 30 years old. I think the SCAE was 10 years younger than that. And as they've just continued to grow, you find yourself with collaborating on issues, and it's kind of like, honestly, it's a little bit of collaborating in some areas and competing in other areas. And so kind of looking at it, it's like, all right, well, what's the best way for us to work together so that we can eliminate the competition and really become more collaborative? And that's where the merger really made sense.
What were some of those competitions? What were some of the competitive areas that you saw that you thought maybe we can eliminate this by working together?
Number one was education. I personally believe that specialty coffee, and this is not an association comment at all, let me just throw that out there to say personal belief, I believe that in specialty coffee, we're a little bit of our own worst enemy. I feel like we make it very hard for customers to know what they can expect when they walk into a cafe. You order a cappuccino at 3 different places, you get 3 wildly different drinks. Then you have, drinks like Gibraltars and flat whites and all of these other things. And I feel like we're really making it hard for consumers to just get a good cup of coffee. And so I genuinely believe that. And so I do think that the advantage of not just were we competitive in the education from a financial standpoint to competing in markets, but ultimately, how do we move past that? How do we make it easy for consumers to just go and order a beverage and it be delicious for them and it not be intimidating and it not be not what they thought it was going to be? And I think these are the first steps towards moving towards that. And I'm not saying that we want to eliminate cultural differences. Those are what make us unique. Those are why we travel, so that we can indulge in those cultural differences. But at the same time, how do we make it easy for the consumer? Because that's what's going to make us successful. If we have people who no longer want to buy our product, we are no longer an industry.
Right. Well said. And now let me ask, if the SCA was a cafe and the membership or people thinking about becoming members were customers and they walk in to the association, what does the SCA want them to experience?
I think some of the biggest things are networking. I don't know if you've been to an SCA show recently, but one of the big reasons, if I was not part of a board or anything else, Mike, for instance, my dad, I obviously go, I'm representing the board, but I obviously can represent Klatch. And so every year he's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go. I don't know if I'm, I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know what they have. And every year he books his ticket 2 weeks before the show, and every year he has a more jam-packed schedule than I do. Because ultimately, once you kind of dig your feet in, there's so many people to connect to help grow your business, to help grow you as an individual, to help bring you to the next level, even if you're not necessarily participating in an education pathways or looking for something specific at the show. Just being around people who inspire you to go out and do better every day is probably one of the biggest reasons to join the association. I think that what we've been able to offer online and make things more accessible for people that was a big hurdle for us as the SCAA with just our education, is being able to get resources out to the consumers. And so, relooking at how do we make things more accessible for our consumers so they can actually partake of them has been a really big switch. So education is something that you're going to see in the U.S. in particular take a totally different format. We've seen it really start to happen the past year with the certified labs, but now with the certified trainers being able to teach different places, you're going to see it it's going to be much easier for people to get the education that they want. And then there's other things. The guilds have done an amazing job with how they've been able to grow themselves, with how they've been able to grow their communities, with the events that they've put on. If you look at, there's this ugly calendar that I will never look at of all of the events that the WCE, SCAA, and SCAE put on at any given time, and it is the most overwhelming thing you will ever see in your life. So just the events that are out there for people that you don't necessarily think of because it might not be right in your hometown, but eventually it will. We are doing so many things right now, which is another great opportunity also. And then, much bigger picture, I mentioned it earlier, if we don't have consumers buying things, if we aren't putting out a product that people want to buy, we're no longer an industry. On the same front, if we do not have a product to sell, we are no longer an industry. So what we've been able to do with research and sustainability, that's probably where most of the collaboration between the two associations started, that was not competitive but very collaborative, that we're most excited about being able to expand into the future. The research, what coffee has done with research the past 10 years versus the 100 years before that is just incredible. And then not just with that, but not just with the research of learning the science behind the product that we're all so invested in, but then also the people who grow it, and how do we make it a better livelihood for them so they actually want to continue to grow it, and they're not just walking away from their farms or taking a check, from a big corporation to sell the land. So those are some of the bigger picture industry-wide things that the association is doing for its customers.
So the big picture, that big picture, I think sometimes is hard for us to see when I look at the unification. And I kind of from the sidelines, I was watching all of the conversation happen and trying to figure out what the benefits were, what were some of the challenges, and the sustainability of coffee in general can seem sort of like this really high-minded. Now, I'm talking in perspective of somebody who's just trying to keep their shop open, and they're not really thinking about the topography of Guatemala necessarily, and climate change or anything like that. But they won't if we're making our customers become used to the taste of coffee that's a result of well-farmed land and sustainable practices, then it seems like those of us in retail it would behoove us to be involved ourselves in the sustainability process. And what you're saying is that this merger of SCAE and SCAA is going to make that information more accessible to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you've been able to see, but even this past year, we've done a much better job. We were joking around at one point where it's like, wow, people have no idea how much work we've done because we've never published it. We've never released it. We've never put it in the chronicles or anything. And that's a huge shame on us. And that's something that we've really been working on is, we're not looking to flood the market and publish 5 things in 1 month now, but doing a much better job of making sure that what we're actually out there doing is getting released to the members, and that they have the opportunity to engage in those conversations and be part of them and have access to that information. So that's one area where, just as I can speak for the SCAA, we didn't do a great job on that. We've really worked hard as a merged association to be able to publish the information and get it out to our members so that they can be part of those conversations with their customers. And, to your point, Chris, these are not conversations. Ultimately, Klatch we're probably a little heavier wholesale than we are retail, but we do, our retail stores do quite well. But those aren't conversations that I'm having with my retail customers either. So from a retailer's perspective, the sustainability of coffee, it does become much bigger than you would, and almost, I don't want to say less important because it doesn't sound right, but like you said, it's not part of your day-to-day concern. Your day-to-day concern is getting money for the cups of coffee, paying your staff, making sure your staff is putting out good drinks, and that's what your customers are concerned about. And what's the new pastry you have, and things like that. So it is, I think, sometimes harder for the retailer to look back at some of those top-level things that the association is doing and figuring out how they apply to them. But they do, and the nice thing is consumers right now want to know more. I would say 10 years ago, we were much more label conscious. Today, people are much more socially engaged in what they're buying from. And so knowing who you're buying from and being able to talk to your customers about those stories are where you can kind of begin those conversations and making it those personal connections. That's what consumers are really looking for these days. And that's where what we're doing at that top level really does trickle down to the retailer.
One of the things I read on the SCA's website, and let me just say that I'm super excited that it's SCA.coffee. I know that's the little thing, but I like it better than org. That's nice.
Good.
Well, anyway, back to things that matter, I suppose. The research being done on consumer habits and spending habits and things like that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because I know that that's one of the benefits that was listed in the people advocating from the board to vote yes on the unification. I wonder if you could speak to that, because it seems like buying trends, customers, the mind of the consumer is something that, as a retailer, or anybody working in retail, will be super excited about.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it. Knowing what your consumers are looking for, knowing who your consumer is. I think that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people still don't totally know. Um, if you were to ask most retailers, hey, who's coming in and buying your coffee every day? I think a lot of people don't necessarily know how to answer that accurately. They might have an idea, but they don't quite know how that translates to how it benefits them, to what products they should be putting out, to where they are cost wise along the grain with their market, to some of the drinks that are distinct to their area as well. The nice thing about our research team right now is they're so good at what they do. So it's a matter of, part of what we're able to do for that consumer research is both top level as well as both regional. So you can kind of have an overall industry picture as long as a much more picture that's unique to your region. Obviously, our regions are large, so it wouldn't quite be Kentucky necessarily, but you know what I mean? We're not just going to combine what's happening in Asia and London and the US into one level of consumer research. It'll be much more broken down than that.
Oh, good. Right. Well, I think I can almost hear somebody asking this question, so I'll ask it. And that is, I know my customers because I talk to them and they come into my store. Why do I need research to tell me who is in my own city?
Oh, there's so many reasons to answer that. I mean, knowledge is power is probably the easiest way to put it. It is probably the easiest way to answer that. And this is an interesting way to answer this question, but I'm going to go ahead and go for it. It's an interesting piece of, as you continue to grow, it will be harder and harder to talk to your customers and know your customers. And if you want to grow, you need to know where you want to grow to and what areas fit in with what you're currently doing. So if you know your customers and if you have research that says, okay, here's who my customers are, and you can match that up and say, hey, this same type of customer is over here, well, that's a good place for you to now expand and grow to, versus maybe you were looking at that area and the research says, wow, that's a completely different demographic that might not work with what I'm trying to do. I'm actually going to go ahead and go over to this area instead. So I think if you're looking at the growth potential, research is a huge way in how you're going to do that.
No, that's a really great point about growth and being able to kind of keep a pulse on what's going on. And this is, I would almost say this is not necessarily big data, but it's almost like this metadata, like big trends that maybe you just don't have time to do. And it sounds like you guys are just reinvesting a lot of energy and focus into providing that kind of information for the retail side of the SCA membership. One of the things that a membership affords you is discounts, and it affords you access to information through the SCA's website. Also events. And one of the functions of the SCAA and now SCA has been, if you're a retailer, you want to take your baristas, you want to take your managers, and you want to bring them to an event and bring them to a barista competition or something like that. And in the past year or so, there's been a little bit of a kerfuffle, if you will, with the regionals and the reformatting of the barista competitions and things like that. And I know you're not, or maybe you are, on the committee for barista competition. So I wonder if you could speak to what can we expect from this unification in terms of future events.
I think, like I already mentioned, with the other piece that we don't necessarily talk about when we talk about the merger of SCAA and SCAE is the WCE, World Coffee Events. So World Coffee Events was equally owned by SCAA and SCAE. It was its own company. It ran itself. As we merged, we obviously took our child with us, if you will. So WCE is no longer its own entity. It is now part of SCA. And it's essentially the events division of SCA. So what that gives us a better opportunity to do is it gives us a better connection to what WCE was doing and taking what was successful, what they were doing over there, and being able to implement that at a more regional level. They are quite global in their scope and the WCE was actually fairly inactive in the U.S. up to this point. So we're going to be able to see what the WCE was doing internationally and see a much bigger presence here in the U.S. There's other things as well. SCAE was doing quite a few events, both through their Roasters Guild as well as their Barista Guild that we we're not doing over here. So some of the events that we have are similar. Some of them are different. So we're also, both guilds of both Roasters and Barista have been sending people to each other's events to figure out what they're doing. Does it work? Is it an event that we can offer? We have Bloom. They have, I forget what it's called. I'll find it though. They have one.
Is it camp?
No, not camp. Camps are fairly similar between the two. I'll find it for us, but they have theirs as well. And so things like that are going to be able to be more offered. When we did the whole competition thing, it was never let's do less events. It was what we're doing with competitions, reaching as many people as we can. Is it the most effective way to reach out to this community? And what we found was, yes, it's very effective. The community is, very connected to this event and wants to hold on to it. And it's very impactful for the community. And we underestimated its value. I think we're the first to say that. It was a miss on our part, the initial step that we took with regionals. And so we backtracked on that and, we've made some changes. And I'm not part of the competitions committee, but I'm very aware of a lot of the larger level things that they're doing. And I think what we're looking to do is just to make sure that the events that we're putting on, again, are high value impact for the communities they're trying to reach. And, like I said, on a board level, we missed how valuable the regionals were to that community. I heard great feedback a lot about what happened this year, about it being some larger events, about how, because they were large events, people I know participated in multiple ones. People were able to travel as a team, which was nice. There were also some things that I'm sure people would like to see improved upon as well, and we'll continue to learn from those and expand. But the goal was never to take events away, and that's still not where we are. We should definitely be able to see an increase in events that we're doing.
Great, good news. So it sounds like what's been going on with what happened in Knoxville and in Austin and things like that are just going to continue to happen, and maybe on a more regional level.
Correct. Yeah. And, how long have you been involved with the Barista Guild for on any level? Like, do you remember, what were the day events that we used to have called jams? Do you remember jams?
Yes, I remember jams. Yep.
Okay. So, it's interesting to me because if you've been in coffee for a long time on a barista level, like you've seen us go from low level, poorly run events to really high level, highly produced events.
Yes.
And so finding out what works, it's like if you've only been in the barista community for 5 years, you've missed a lot of how we got to where we are right now. And so to completely non-board or association level, what was frustrating for me to hear from some people during the whole regional things, like, well, we're just going to do this and that. It's like, but we came from there and we didn't want that. So, it's just kind of like knowing the history of how we got to where we are today, I think helps to really inform the conversation of what's the best way to move forward. And what's nice about the events, the competition committee is it has a great mix of both old and new blood. People who do know that history and really represent well. And same with on the Barista Guild level as well. They are the same way. But it's just interesting to see how things almost go full circle. We went from the jams to the highly produced, and now people want to go to more local jam events. So, I don't know what the right answer is exactly, but I definitely think that we're willing to try 100 different things and see what sticks and what works and what satisfies the community, knowing that it's ever evolving. I'm sure when we find the magic formula, it will be a magic formula for that night that the stars aligned, and then that formula will continue to have to evolve in order to be successful. And that's okay too. And one of my favorite things about the association, being involved in it, is, we do strategy planning every 2 to 3 years because ultimately, like, we know the strategy has to continue to evolve. Your North Star is moving. You have to be able to continue to follow it and recalibrate yourself and make sure that you are serving your members. And again, we're not perfect. We're not going to get it always right, but hopefully we get a lot right along the way and a lot of people are served.
So before we continue talking with Heather Perry all about the SCA and how it relates to us as retailers, I want to talk with you a little bit about our sponsor, Prima Coffee. Prima is a specialty coffee equipment supplier based out of Louisville, Kentucky. And from the beginning of their company, they've set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public. Their focus is on curating the best equipment for every need. That goes from grinders to espresso machines, under-counter fridges, I mean, it's pretty much anything you can think about that you need for your coffee shop. They have it. And they put a big emphasis also on having the experience in-house to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. I've known them for a long time. I really do vouch for these guys. We use them at the store where I am a manager, and I've always been pleased with the service I've gotten from them. And right now, when you visit the website, prima-coffee.com, you can use a promo code that they've devised just for our listeners. That is the promo code KEYS10. That's KEYS 10. And that'll give you $10 off any purchase over $75. Some restrictions apply. So you go to prima-coffee.com, and when you check out, use the promo code KEYS10, that's KEYS and the number 10, and you'll get the discount available only to the Keys to the Shop audience. So thank you very much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop and your generosity. Really appreciate you all and the work you do to provide us with the tools we need to make great coffee. So let's get back to our conversation with SCA Vice President Heather Perry. So all of these plans for enhanced access, enhanced relatability of these events, strategically sort of streamlining the larger networking type events where you're not having competing events so that people have to choose between two things they love. I mean, these are all exciting things to hear about. Where are we in the process in terms of seeing those things come to fruition? Like, what are some of the first dominoes to fall? Because I know that the SCAE and SCAA were separate for a few months or so, and now is it completely unified? And what are the first things that we're going to start seeing?
Legally, it's not completely unified, but we are one organization in the sense that we have one board of directors. So the 18 board of directors started on January 1st and have been working as a team since then. We definitely, the show in Seattle is definitely kind of our first big baby that we put out there as our big success. Rico and Budapest will be in World of Coffee taking place in Budapest will be our next big event. But lots of tiny events have obviously happened within those timeframes as well. The huge, I would say the biggest domino from the U.S. side that we're going to see is the new education system launch. So that new education system launches July 1st, and the opportunities that will afford for people to get education closer to them, not having to travel to necessarily a certified lab, but being able to get it. For instance, it's Centergus. If you wanted, you guys could bring in an AST to host a training at Centergus, which is something that was previously not available. So opportunities like that are some of the biggest things that you're going to see happen. And that starts July 1st. So we're working on a tough timeline to make sure that we have all of the education complete by then. Obviously, when we merged, the education was 80% there. They were 80% aligned. To an extent, it's just coffee, right? You need hot water, you need coffee, and then you end up with a beverage. So to an extent, we're 80% there. That's obviously an enormous oversimplification of it.
Sure.
How hot do you take the water? What should the TDS of the water be? Does TDS even matter when it comes to water anymore? So there's a bazillion questions of how you now put those two items together. And that last 20% is definitely the hardest 20% to get over.
Yeah. And you need a cup as well.
Yeah. Oh, I just drink right from the pot, Chris.
Oh, right. You're a purist.
That's right. That's right. So that's where we are now. So that's where that July 1st deadline is the biggest one. And that's where I think we're going to see some of the biggest dominoes start to fall. We obviously have one website. And speaking of education, it was up until like 3 days ago, when you hit on education, you had to go to either the SCAA or the SCAE website. There is now an SCA education page with information on it as far as certified labs and trainings coming up. So that was actually really exciting to see as well. You're continuing to see the brand evolve, and even seeing the brand more places, I think will help to solidify the SCA within the community and not the SCAA and the SCAE. As soon as we're able to take those off of our website, I think that will be a huge domino to fall when we're just working off of one system. There will be champagne bottles will be popping that night. That will be a huge mile marker for us when those come off the site. So those are some of the big things that you're going to be able to really visibly see coming up.
Yeah.
And then if you're working From a volunteer perspective, if you're working a little bit more closer with the association, you're already having meetings with Europeans. If you're a U.S. volunteer, you're already having meetings. So you're involved in a lot of that work, and it's part of your day to day already.
So how do you get somebody involved in the SCA right now? What are the good first steps for somebody to, maybe volunteering is one of them, or, get that membership. What would you suggest?
Yeah, I would say if you're wondering, should I join the SCA? Is it worth it or not? Go to an event. I think the events speak for themselves. The networking, the quality of the events that we put on, the people who attend these events and the connections that you're going to make, I think are invaluable. So I think if you just, if you're wondering, is the SCA worth your money? Go to an event, and I think you will find out it's absolutely worth your money. If you're already a member and you're wondering, how do I better utilize my membership? What am I missing out on? Pick up a phone, send an email. The last thing we want is for people to be lost and afraid to reach out. This should make your life better and easier. And if it's not, we want to help you fix that problem. So Heather@KlatchRoasting.com is an easy place to start. Ellie is our kind of special projects manager, and she sees it as her personal mission to make sure everybody kind of has a home. So if you're looking for a volunteer spot, reaching out to Ellie Matuzak is a great place to start as well. Or Ellie Hudson, I think it is. That's another great place to start if you want to volunteer. She will definitely ask you the right questions to put you with the right people to maximize your skill and interest level so that you can help be part of this great community and organization and industry as well. So those are kind of two places where I would start. If you're not part of anything right now, just go to an event. I think that's a great starting place, whether it's a barista guild, whether it's an association event, whatever it may be, I would say start there.
Awesome. So now I just want to interject here. I know so many people. Obviously, I know you. I've known you for a long time through competitions through the industry. Also, Ellie, I used to teach latte art with her way long ago at Coffee Fest. And, I go on the website and I see all of these folks that are basically giving their time to this organization. And to making it work. There are hundreds, if not, maybe I'm wrong, thousands of people that make this thing work, and it's all for a love of community and coffee. And so I would say to anybody, who has questions about this, and just hearing the willingness and the resources available to them to reach out and let their voice be known, it's super encouraging. And I would say, definitely at least make the first step to start communication and ask questions. So people can reach out to, is it Ellie at...
I'm going to say SCA.coffee, but I'm going to look it up on my email right now. So I'm it just magically pops up when I start typing Ellie. So Ellie's is... LEHELLIEH@SCA.coffee. And Rick Reinhardt is another one. He's the CEO of the organization in essence, and he's always more than willing to read an email, and he wants to make sure as well. He each member he takes very personally, and he wants to make sure that they are getting what they need as well. So he's another. Never be afraid to reach out to Rick. He gets tons of emails, both good and bad. And, that's the thing as well, is I think as an association, we're not afraid to take criticism and try and figure out what are we doing wrong. We want the opportunity to fix things. So, whether you're confused, whether you have, feedback you want to give us, we're all ears. I think that's something that I would hope people know. Social media has made things very interesting these days. Where I find out people are unhappy on there sometimes, and it's like, oh wow, I had no idea. So I would say, from an organization level, we're not afraid of criticism. We want to continue to excel, and so if you feel like we're missing something, reach out to us for sure.
And after all, it is a membership organization, and SCAA started in 1980, early 80s. And, that's a long time to be around. And a lot of things have changed. And the reason that they've changed is not because there's this, constant hierarchy of people that have forced this change. It's because the membership has changed and people have communicated with what their needs are. And so if, we're retailers and, we're wanting to get a lot of value out of this, participation obviously is a huge part of creating almost the answer to that question for yourself in a way.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this too, Chris. I think retailers have an interesting way to look at it. We want retailers to be able to come and be part of the association and be able to grow their business. I think that's something that's really important to us, because ultimately the way the industry goes is retailers growing, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, roasters have an online business, but ultimately the way that we're selling our coffee is through day to day, whether you show up through the drive-through, whether you get it with a donut, whether you have it in ceramic standing up, or whether it's served to you with sparkling water. Ultimately, that's how most of us are consuming our coffee, and that's how we're selling it. So we want retailers to grow, and making sure, figuring out the best way to help retailers do that is a constant conversation. You know what I mean? Is it that high level? Is it through the education? I mean, those are conversations that we're constantly having at a board level and at an organization level as well. So I think it's a tough spot, because as a retailer, sometimes I look at the association, I'm like, well, what's happening? But like you said, like the market retail value report, those are huge to take advantage of for your association. Education is another one, whether you want to educate yourself, whether you want to use the organization for training for your staff. There's a lot of different ways to help utilize it and get people. One of the big things that we do with our own staff is, and one of the benefits we found of getting them involved with the organization, is they just feel more committed to kind of coffee and more excited about coffee in a way that sometimes, with me alone, they just hit a ceiling. But being involved with it from an outside perspective helps get them a little bit more invested and excited, which is always nice. So being able to introduce your staff to it and get involved with it from a retailer perspective is another huge advantage for retailers. And the way that the new membership is set up is actually very advantageous to retailers in that sense, because you get now with your company membership, you also get individual memberships that you can pass on to staff and so on.
So here's a follow-up question to that. And I agree with you. Retail is where it all kind of happens. It's where the magic happens. Handing a cup of coffee to a customer creates the impression of what specialty coffee is on the public. It's where this research data comes from, is how well are people making coffee out there. And that seeds the research information, all the points that connect and everything else. And so the way the retail goes, the industry goes, I totally believe that. We have, I think, in specialty coffee, a very independent spirit. And when we hear about, bringing things together under one roof and creating one global education pathway for coffee, I think some people might say, and I think I've even thought this at times, is, well, what if I train my staff differently? Am I just going to send them to the SCA and have them unlearn the things that I'm teaching them? I
totally agree. And we're the same way at Klatch. So we obviously at Klatch have a pretty intense training system that we put our staff through. And I have staff that will have been with me and been a barista with me for a year, serving hundreds of customers a day, literally. And then, we decided to get them involved. And so we signed them up for camp, or they signed up for camp. And all of a sudden, if you've been there, there's you can't test out of things. So they're back at level 1. So this barista who has been, well trained, is back learning espresso 101, if you will. And what we have found is, even when we do that, there's value in learning from different instructors. And so there's value in learning different ways. I think the great thing about coffee with that independent spirit is, again, knowledge is power. Even if they know my way, it's only going to take them so far. What's going to help them what's going to help them take their career and what they're able to do for me and bring to my customers is them knowing lots of things about coffee and why we do it our way and what makes our way different, for better or for worse, whatever you kind of, however you want to look at it. But knowing that there's not just one way to make coffee, but we've intentionally decided that this is how we're going to do it. From an education level, we constantly are having conversations of what is a standard, what is a best practice. Standard and best practice are not the same; they're very different. And the way that we kind of talk about it is, you can pay 99 cents for a hamburger at McDonald's, or you can pay $25 for a hamburger at a steakhouse. Are those the same product? Yes or no? And ultimately, how do you build a hamburger? What is a hamburger? Is it a bun with meat? What if you wrap it in lettuce? What if you, I mean,
hello, Hardee's, yeah.
Okay, so now, but the hamburger industry has managed to survive and thrive still, correct? They're not hurting because of the variety of hamburgers out there. So within coffee, we should be able to embrace our differences and yet still be successful and still teach basics.
I love it. I feel like we need a hamburger episode of Keys to the Shop at least. Yeah. I think all hamburgers are pre-ground, right? That's the big thing in coffee too.
That's right.
Anyway, so you know what I hear, knowing lots of different ways. I love the idea of learning a lot of different styles of doing coffee. Even though I'm not actually doing them myself, it does reinforce that. But because I might like the learner's perspective of, navigating my way through the industry, some of that is because I don't own my own coffee shop, and that worry that we are going to have people questioning us. Maybe we just have to, search your soul for a second. If that's you, like thinking about how, I don't want people learning a different way because it'll threaten our way. Well, I think that's a growth opportunity too for owners and operators who establish certain standards in their cafe to actually have good reasons for the things that they do. And, sometimes you might go to a camp and you might go to another event and find out that what you were doing was actually wrong.
100%. If you can't justify it to your staff, then why are you doing it? And you might still do it the same way, but now you might be able to come up with a better answer as to why you do it. So, it's a matter of, I do think it's a matter of sending the right people, sending people who have those open minds and who are going to come back with that positive attitude of, hey, here's what I learned. How do we incorporate this? Why don't we do this? And then you being able to have those conversations openly with them. I think that's an enormous part of taking advantage of sending anybody to any event or being involved in any event. I'm not saying that cafes should change what they're doing because one person came back and said, I learned this from a star barista and I think we should be doing it. No, it might not make sense for you, and that's okay too. But why do they do that? Why do you do it your way? I think answering those questions are what's going to help push and grow and take you to the next level. Not necessarily changing what you're doing, but being able to better answer what you're doing. And then, maybe you do make small changes. At Klatch, we change the way we do things on a fairly regular basis, from the equipment we choose to the techniques that we're doing to satisfy those different equipments. I mean, I'm constantly looking at what we're doing and saying, is this the best? Does it does it make the most sense? Am I putting out the best products in the most efficient way for my customers? And I think you constantly have to reevaluate. There's a balance of having that consistency, but there's also, you can't be afraid to change. You're either going forward or you're going backwards, but you're never staying the same is kind of the way that I look at it.
And that's the way that it was discussed for unification as well.
100%.
Going forward. And one of the last things that I wanted to talk about here, actually talking about different perspectives, is the multicultural leadership opportunities that this unification affords both parties. Now, what are the things that you all hope to gain from having a multicultural leadership at the SCA in terms of how we advance as an industry?
Oh, gosh. There's so many ways you could go with that. I mean, I think ultimately diversity just brings a better viewpoint in general, right? Whether it's gender diversity, whether it's age diversity, whether it's cultural diversity. When you bring them together, the more perspectives you have, the bigger picture you have. The less diversity you have, the smaller picture you have. So when you look at something like coffee, that in its nature is global.
Right.
It is consumed in one country, it is roasted in another country, and sometimes consumed in a third country quite often, right? So when you have things like this, if you do not have a diverse organization, if you don't have a diverse leadership representing that industry, how far can you go with it? Realistically,
sure.
You're only looking at a small piece of that picture. So it's hugely important to what we do.
Indeed, and it sounds like all of what was discussed with the events and educational pathways, talking about what we learn even amongst ourselves as we aren't afraid of learning different ways of doing things. I can only imagine that the diversity of our representative leadership in this organization is going to help just represent more of the membership in a more effective way. So it's going to be exciting to see that as well.
Yeah, it's a new process, and there's obviously learning and growing pains as you go along. But I gotta tell you, the people who we work with on the board and on the staff level are really amazing. What the staff in particular of the association has been able to do has been really incredible. They are all out to really put out the best organization possible for our members on a daily basis. They work really, really hard, and they're an amazing group of people to work with. And, it's been a huge challenge for them as well. They are all of a sudden having to have lots of phone calls lots of conference calls at 5 a.m. and at 9 p.m. And, your office is now much more global than it was. So it's been a big venture for them as well. But it's, again, opened up what we do from an organization level at the staff to board meetings, how we work on a board level, something that we've had to overcome. We finished our second board meeting. And there's some differences in how the SCAE ran their meetings versus how the SCAA ran their meetings. And so even just getting, it's not that many people. It's only 9 from each organization, but it's a diverse 9. And when you put those 18 together, there's definitely some differences there. And I think it forces all of us to be more open-minded I'll give you an example on a personal level from the education that really just stretched my way of thinking. So, with the SCAA, we've always had brewing as part of our foundations. We've always had brewing as part of what we taught for all of our barista levels, right?
Right.
In Europe, brewing is its own pathway. So you can become a barista certification without ever going through brewing. And that was a big and immediately I was like, well, that's ridiculous. The barista has to know how to brew. Why would you not know how to brew? The reality is, though, a good majority of the world does not consume drip coffee like we do here in the U.S.
That's a good point.
It was, and I never thought of it that way. And when I was talking to these ASTs from Europe, it's like they don't drink drip coffee in Italy. Why would we make it a requirement that a barista knows how to make drip coffee? It's a different profession. It's a completely different beverage. It's not something that they do at all. And it never occurred to me at all. And so literally little conversations like that completely changed the way that I think about coffee. We spend a lot of time on it. Brewer's Cup obviously brought brewing to another level, but there's still a good amount of people where espresso, and a lot of cultures where it's espresso that's the main coffee beverage that they're drinking. It's not drip. And so that's just like a really small piece on. And I'll tell you this, because brewing is now its own pathway, it is way more comprehensive than it ever would have been being just part of the barista pathway.
Okay.
So it really gave the opportunity for our barista, our brewing pathway. Oh, our brewing pathway is incredible right now. It's got so much information on it, and it's way more comprehensive than it would have been had it just been part of the barista pathway. So, and if you talk to some of the U.S. heritage education, I don't know that they're sold on it necessarily. So I'm not saying that they're thrilled about it or that. And I don't actually know where it's all landing. July 1st, we'll know exactly what classes and what are the exact KSAs for each level. But just from my personal experience, that was, I never would have thought of coffee like that without that conversation.
Nice. So all of this is just so that we can make coffee better. Yeah. Just like the website says.
I was just going to say that. That's why we put it on there, because that's ultimately the goal.
Yes. So now, thank you so much, Heather, for your time today talking to us about this. And also thank you for your work and all that you do in the organization and for Specialty Coffee. I wonder, where can we go for more information after this episode to learn more about the SCA and opportunities that are available to us?
Let's start at SCA.coffee. It's the website. It's constantly being updated, especially as we continue to emerge more and continue to unify the little pieces. That's where you're going to, and if it's not there, it will link you to the correct A Heritage or E Heritage site that you need to go to. But I would start with SCA.coffee.
Excellent. So any final thoughts for us?
No, I mean, it's been fun. I'm super excited to have the opportunity to do here, especially talking about retailers and how they fit into the association, because I think because they are not so blatantly talked about sometimes, they think that they're forgotten about. And so it's been great to kind of be able to address what the association and what retailers can do and take advantage of as part of the association. So thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. It's my honor. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of what becomes available and what is available for retailers and what's in store for the association. So thanks again, Heather.
It's been my pleasure.
Well, I hope that inspired you to look further into being more involved in the SCA. It's just a great group of people doing great things for specialty coffee. And especially on the back of all that Heather shared, it sounds like there's a lot of great things in store. So if you're not involved in the SCA or you're not a member, you should not feel as though you are less of a professional because of it. I mean, FOMO, or fear of missing out, is not a really great reason to make many decisions at all, Instead, I think due diligence is the first thing. Like, research it, be confident in your decision, and don't make a hasty decision. I wouldn't expect anybody who was unconvinced before about joining the SCA to just jump into membership right after this episode, although that might be great. But go to their website and explore, see what's available, see how it fits your organization. As with anything that involves community, the more active you are, the more you get from it. Now, I know I've had my fair share of hesitancy about membership. I've been in specialty coffee for 17 years, and so my thoughts about like the cost of membership and what I get from it, they go back and forth. But, to be honest, you really shouldn't join the organization, or I think any organization, this is just my opinion, unless you're willing to not just receive the benefits of being a member, but also contribute benefits for others. So basically giving and as well as getting. And I think there's something magical with relationships, for instance, that happens when generosity goes both ways. And in any association is only as strong as its members are active. So if you find that there is a need for a change in the industry or in the organization, you see it, which is, of course, inevitable, you can affect that change more by voicing your thoughts, electing those that represent the industry values that you have, and generally being aware and plugged in. It sounds like a win-win, but leave that up to you. Go to SCA.coffee, explore what they have. Reach out to Heather, reach out to others at the SCA if you have specific questions that you need answered. And they are, as you heard, passionate about this, and so they will make time for you for sure. So thanks, Heather, again, for joining us on the show. Really appreciate your insights and breaking down what we can be looking for from the SCA. And thank you for all of the work that you do with the organization as well. So if you want to know more about Keys to the Shop, you can go to the website, keystotheshop.com. That's where you're going to find the show notes for this episode and all of our other past episodes on the resources page. You can also find all of our past episodes in one place. And also, if you have questions, you want to email me or suggestions, etc., it's chris@keystotheshop.com, CHRIS, no funny spellings, @keystotheshop.com. And if you like the show and you want to help us out, you can go to iTunes, not only subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, you can leave us a rating or a review. It's really easy, just a couple of clicks of a mouse or, whatever you're using to click with, and it's done. And it really is encouraging to see how the show has helped you in your personal journey in specialty coffee or your shop. And it also helps the standing of our podcast in iTunes so that more people get the content of these episodes. So that's it for our show today. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a great week, and let's all just agree that we can go this week and do what the SCA says on their website when you log into SCA.coffee. Make coffee better. And I think we're all going to be able to do that today and all throughout the week. And I hope that this episode, as well as all of our other past episodes, have given you keys to the shop.